Lila Dean had always considered herself calm under pressure. As Harborview's premier event planner, she had wrangled runaway alpacas at a petting zoo ribbon cutting, diverted a hurricane-threatened seafood festival to an indoor skating rink, and once repurposed 1,000 misprinted commemorative towels into impromptu tablecloths. Nothing, she believed, could surprise her any more. Then the grand fireworks rehearsal for Harborview's summer Jubilee went silent. It was supposed to be a triumphant afternoon. The pyrotechnics barges bobbed just offshore, like patient whales, while crews threaded mortars, shells, and Roman candle racks through labelled quarters of Deck B. Lila stood on the marina pier, headset crackling, her clipboard annotated with 4 colours of ink. If tomorrow night came off flawless, she would land the coastal contract she'd coveted for years. She glanced at her phone. 3:48 p.m., 15 minutes until the first Q test. Marco's still inside the storage barge, her assistant Gemma reported, jogging up. Said he wanted to run one last fuse continuity check. Typical, Lila muttered fondly. Marco Rivas, the Jubilee's beloved pyrotechnics chief, preferred tinkering to delegating. Tell him 5 minutes, then we roll. Gemma nodded and trotted down the floating walkway toward the matte grey barge marked B2. Lila turned back to the rehearsing band on shore, signalling the drummer to watch his tempo. When she looked again, Gemma was frozen at the doorway, hand pressed to her mouth. A gut weight dropped through Lila's stomach. She ran. Inside, between stacked boxes of 10-inch chrysanthemum shells, Marco lay on the metal deck. His flame-retardant jumpsuit collapsed like an uninflated balloon. The air reeked of burnt insulation. Beside him, a half-meter length of quick-match fuse smouldered, coating the cramped hold with serpentine curls of grey smoke. One end had been cleanly snipped. The other was blown apart into frayed copper. Lila knelt and felt for a pulse she already knew wasn't there. The rehearsal horn outside never sounded. Phone Lieutenant Owen Brayley of Harborview PD arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by a paramedic team and 2 crime scene techs. He ducked beneath the hatch, blinking in the gloom. "'Cause looks electrical," he told them after examining the charred fuse. "Copper inner wire, maybe 40 volts from a Q line. High enough to shock if someone's grounded." "But why was it live during inspection?" Lila asked. "The board shouldn't be powered until final checks." Her voice echoed brittly. "Exactly what we'll figure out," Brayley said. "For tonight, the rehearsal's cancelled. Harborview Fire Marshal already wants the whole Jubilee postponed." Lila straightened. "With respect, Lieutenant, postponement will bankrupt half my vendors. Marco wouldn't have wanted that." She swallowed. "Let me help. I know his procedures, his team, the site layout. I can trace who had access." Brayley studied her across the bluish light of phone flashes. "Officially, you're a witness, Miss Dean. Unofficially, I'll take the help, provided you don't cross tape lines." "Deal," Lila said before second thoughts could intervene. 2. They convened at the marina office, a prefab cube smelling of tidewater and burnt coffee. Brayley printed a list of on-site personnel. 34 names, too many. He highlighted 3 who'd entered the barge. Greer Abbott, Marco's senior tech. Jonah Piers, vendor delivering finale shells. Councilman Benedict Hale, chair of the Jubilee Oversight Committee. Greer Abbott sat hunched beside the water cooler, wiry and intense, rubbing fuse powder from under her nails. "I left Marco at 2:40, she insisted. "He waved me off, said he'd recrimp a bad line himself. I went topside to test the radio receivers." "You didn't repower the control board?" Lila asked. Greer shook her head so hard her goggles slipped. The panel breaker was off when I left. If someone flipped it, that's your culprit. Jonah Piers, a burly 40-something who smelled faintly of ammonium perchlorate, explained he'd wheeled 3 pallets of titanium flash powder into the forehold at 2:30. I never went aft, he said, hands aloft. Marco signed the delivery sheet, joked about buying me a beer if nobody blew us both to Kansas. When Councilman Hale arrived, his seersucker suit looked absurdly bright amid the cops' navy blues. I visited to confirm the Jubilee branding on the mortar racks, he said. Public relations photos. Marco showed me the custom stenciling. Very patriotic. I departed at 3:15. I certainly didn't activate machinery. Brayley eyed him. But you could have. You have engineering background. Aerospace, not fireworks, Hale scoffed. I wouldn't know the first switch. Lila's planner brain ticked. On a pyrotechnic board, the main breaker was a fat, red toggle. Anyone could find it. 3 Sunset splashed copper across the harbour. Police sealed the barge, but Lila received Brayley's begrudging okay to review Marco's laptop for cue sheets. She took it to the empty bandstand where floodlights hummed. The last edit's timestamp read 3:27 p.m., the window between Hale's departure and rehearsal silence. Marco had altered one cue, CH-15 fan blast. Beside it he'd typed swap to V-series igniter. She frowned. V-series igniters included a built-in continuity LED. They shouldn't misfire. Did he suspect a fault earlier? Her phone buzzed, a text from Greer. Meet me by fuel dock. Important. The pier beyond the locked Jubilee zone was deserted. Greer paced beside plastic drums of diesel. Marco left this in the workshop, she whispered, producing a slender USB drive. Said if anything ever happened, I should give it to someone he trusted. Not the cops, the committee, or his ex-partner. I figure that's you. Why not the cops? Because, Greer said, it's about sabotage. He didn't think Brayley would believe him without proof. Back in her car, Lila slotted the drive into her tablet. A single folder opened, phosphorus scare. Inside were dated photos of scorched canisters, labels scraped off, and spreadsheets of chemical analyses. A note in Marco's voice memo said, counterfeit shells mimic Zed fireworks inventory numbers. Elevated phosphorus, too hot. Could blow under 6 seconds. Somebody's slipping them in. Lila exhaled. If high flash shells were mixed with standard loads, an early ignition could chase back through fuses, overloading circuits, turning the control board into a live snake. Maybe Marco had found one, tried replacing the igniter, and was electrocuted before he finished. But who'd insert counterfeit shells? Competitors? A political stunt? She phoned Brayley, relayed what she'd found. He agreed to test every unlaunched shell, but still waffled on postponing the Jubilee. Can you guarantee the show's safe? He asked. Not until we know who swapped those shells, Lila replied. Give me the night. For Harbourview slept fitfully. Lila parked outside the shuttered boardwalk arcade, where Jonah Piers stored his delivery truck. Through the chain link, she saw him under sodium security lamps, unloading cartons. Unapproved late-night work. She called his name. Jonah jumped, knocking a crate that spilled spent wooden plugs. Lila pointed to the unfamiliar logo, Jin Shen Exports. Not your usual supplier, she said. Jonah's shoulders slumped. Look, local shows won't pay premiums anymore. I fill gaps with cheaper imports, legal enough. Marco flagged some as overpowered last month, but I figured he'd just toss them if he disliked them. Toss them? They're hazardous. He never said fatal, Jonah muttered. And he signed off on today's delivery. Lila's breath caught. If Marco signed off, maybe he recognized the threat only after Jonah left. Still, Jonah's negligence stood out, but it felt like accident, not malice. She emailed Brayley the crate photos, then drove to City Hall. Councilman Hale kept late hours. A light glowed in his corner office. She buzzed security and climbed the stairs. Hale answered in shirt sleeves, tie undone. "Miss Dean, it's midnight." "So it is," Lila said, stepping inside. On his desk lay drafts of tomorrow's press release. Councilman Hale safeguards community. Jubilee rescheduled until fireworks comply. "You planned to cancel all along," she accused. Hale's chin rose. "Harborview spends 200 grand on this spectacle. I argued for reallocating funds to shoreline restoration, but the mayor wants the flash. One safety mishap and public opinion shifts. I didn't harm Rivas, but I won't deny the tragedy underscores my point. Did you facilitate that mishap?" "I don't traffic in explosives," Hale said. But his gaze flicked toward a locked cabinet behind the desk. Lila took 2 careful steps. "The red dust on your cuffs isn't office chalk. It's strontium dye," she said, remembering the crimson smear she'd noticed in the marina office. "You touched shells. I handle evidence for the Oversight Committee. You're not cleared to open pyrotechnic containers." Lila's mind raced. "Unless you swapped them." Brayley, whom she'd secretly alerted via a text with Hale's address, chose that moment to appear in the doorway. "Mind if we look inside that cabinet, Councilman?" Hale's face tightened. "You'll need a warrant." "Already have one," Brayley lied pleasantly while producing a folded sheet. Hale's shoulders sagged. Inside were 2 unmarked shells, larger than the standard 6 inches. Brayley's tech unscrewed a cap, sniffed, nodded grimly. "Phosphorus overcharge." Hale sank into his chair. "I simply wanted to show the procurement committee how reckless these displays are," he whispered. "One demonstration, no one hurt, just a spectacular flare, would have shifted budgets." "You energized a live board," Brayley said flatly. "That's no demonstration, that's homicide." Hale's hands shook. "I thought Rivas had left the barge, I swear." 5 dawn bruised purple over the harbour as police cruisers whisked Hale downtown. Brayley drafted his preliminary report. Cause of death: electrocution triggered by unauthorized power-up and counterfeit shell insertion. Suspect: Benedict Hale. He underscored a line. Investigation initiated by witness Lila Dean. Outside, gulls wheeled above the taped-off pier. Lila sat on an equipment case, exhaustion a heavy cape. Greer approached with 2 coffees. "They arrested Hale." "Yes," Lila said. "He admitted to switching the shells yesterday morning before club photographers arrived. Marco spotted one during his continuity check, pulled it out, started replacing the igniter. Hale, thinking Marco had stepped away, powered the board from the pier remote to light a single test flare. The charge travelled back through the still-connected igniter line. And killed him," Greer finished softly. "If Marco hadn't paused to document everything on that USB," Lila said, "we'd still be guessing." Greer lifted her cup in salute to invisible spirits. "So, Jubilee?" The question hovered. Fireworks after death felt wrong, yet this city had lost much in the last year. Tourist dollars, local pride. A safe show dedicated to Marco's memory might heal more than it harmed. "We do it," Lila said, surprising herself. "We purge every suspicious shell, triple-check continuity, and launch at dusk." 6. The following evening, Harborview's harbour thrummed with expectant chatter. News outlets broadcast live, praising swift justice and improved safety. On the control barge, Greer manned the panel Marco once commanded. A black ribbon was tied around her sleeve. Lila stood beside her. She'd swapped her usual clipboard for Marco's beat-up field notebook, its margins doodled with blooming chrysanthemums, matching the fireworks he'd loved. At 9:02 the band struck Stars and Stripes Forever. Greer's finger hovered over Q1. "Ready?" Lila whispered. Greer smiled through shining eyes. Fire. The first volley arced up, shimmering white peonies that blossomed into gold. Crowd cheers floated across the water. Lila exhaled, feeling the release spread like warmth through her chest. Q10 unfurled cobalt willows. Q21 filled the sky with red hearts. And the finale, Marco's signature, sent a 9-second waterfall of crackling silver from the suspension bridge, its reflection turning the harbour into liquid starlight. When the echoing booms faded, a hush swept the audience, followed by a roar that seemed to lift the very pier. Lila blinked back tears. Above, smoke drifted like ghosts finally at peace. 7. Later, while volunteers folded chairs, Lieutenant Brayley found Lila leaning against a speaker tower. "City Council votes next week on your coastal contract," he said. "I'd bet tonight sealed it." She shrugged, smiling tiredly. "I'll settle for 8 hours of sleep." Brayley cleared his throat. "Rivas's family asked me to give you this." He handed her a small black case. Inside lay Marco's favourite sparklighter, engraved with 3 words, "Keep the fire." "Thank you," Lila whispered. Brayley nodded toward the quiet harbour. "You sparked the investigation that solved this. Don't forget that." She looked at the lighter, thumb grazing its flint wheel, then out at the still glowing horizon, where lingering embers hung like distant planets. Tomorrow would bring reports, debriefs, and new deadlines. But for now, Harbourview was alight with the memory of a man who understood that fireworks, like life, were brightest when shared. Lila tucked the lighter into her pocket, drew in the briny night air, and walked toward the parking lot, the echo of safe explosions still rumbling softly in her bones.